Pasadena Foothills CCL chapter, and it's my pleasure and honor to introduce our two speakers in this session. And first of all, I'll introduce the guy who's going to be our first speaker. And by the way, we're leaving room at the end for interaction, questions, and so on. And you said something about a laser type of thing, right?
Yeah, we had a thought of, if time permits, that we would have you practice giving a quick overview of the REMI study to your neighbor.
If time
You'll be
permits.
graded.
I can do it.
Anyway, Tristan Carlin was the leader of our group in La Jolla for 4 years. After obtaining his PhD in marine biology in an area which you'll all be familiar with, the evolutionary genetics of the innate immune systems of fishes.
Very helpful.
Since then, he's found his way to the Department of Oncology Software at Illumina, a company that makes most of the DNA sequencers. And his CCL group was famous for its weekly happy hours. And it created both the carbon tax intro video on the CCL website. Yay. And this group also fostered a 2-week summer program with the University of California at San Diego and the University of California in the District of Columbia that brings high school students to Scripps Institute for a week to learn some basics of climate and physics before flying them to Washington, D.C. for a week of hands-on civics experience with their members of Congress. And he's happy to speak about the REMI study, but he wants it noted that his formal training has nothing to do with economics. Tristan Carlin.
Thank you. And I know Todd sent around a wonderful little slide that we were going to put at the beginning of every talk.
Don't work.
They might.
Well,
Is Paul? Can it
yes.
working? Okay, good. Nice. Okay, yes. So Todd Capson gave us a very, the other Todd Albans, sorry, collaborator, gave us all very nice slides to have as our intro slides. But I wanted to leave my desktop background up because it's a reminder of what we're doing it for. This is my daughter. When she turned 1 last October. She's now 15 months, and she learned to walk just last week. Yeah. Same day as the Women's March. All right, there you go. Take a picture of that.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. All right, so the time will be short, so I'm going to leave it at a relatively high level, which is what you need when you're going to be telling this to people. Because as you might have heard or even tried to do, if you go into heavy details with someone who disagrees with you, they'll suddenly feel the same way you would if somebody gave you data that you didn't believe. It's kind of like, I need to look at that. Yeah, it is kind of, oh, it's on automatic. All right. It's on stop now. Good. All right, great. So there's my outline. Yeah, you'll get through it. All right, my older picture. There's some things my group did. If Jared comes in here, most of this can be laid upon his CV. But yeah, did some neat things. There's our group from way back then. It looks like somebody died, but that's actually my picture because I wasn't there in photo day. But yes, we are famous for our previously Tuesday happy hours where we just meet. Everybody we take turns bringing a growler from a local brewery and boozing it. I like to joke that we were a drinking club with political problems. Anyway, so who is Remy? What is this Remy thing? All right, what's that all about? It stands for Regional Economic Modeling Incorporated. In short, I was told the video is online and you'll see what I saw there. The story is that the Massachusetts group wanted to know, at least for Massachusetts, what would happen if there was a carbon tax? How bad would it be? And there are companies that will try and model that with various models. One of them that is relatively well respected, I don't know how many there actually are, like I said, I'm not in economics, is Remy. So they picked it up and they ran the numbers and they said, hey, it's not so bad, it's actually kind of good. Their original instructions weren't, hey, make this look good. It was, all right, we have this thing, this proposed legislation, it should help the environment, how bad is it going to be for our state? And they said, not bad at all, look at this, here's some numbers. So then it spiraled up from there, and then it was run for the whole country. And so I'll give you the basics on those results. And as I said, this is a company that has done this for local and state governments, as well as some federal government studies. I wish I thought about it right before the talk, like, I wish I could tell some legislatures, like, oh, Remy, remember them from? But I don't know, so hopefully they'll have that on their website.
I got a good one for you, just so you hear this. They did some of the modeling, some of the most important modeling for like California Air Board on their new carbon tax strategy. I'm sorry, carbon, not carbon tax, I wish. But carbon tax was included in it for their new carbon plan.
Okay.
So Remy's a player here in California as well.
Great, cool, okay. And on the website, years ago, I remember seeing something they did for Kentucky. And,
Texas.
yeah. So what did they model? How did they do this? So they modeled a carbon tax, obviously, and a revenue neutral one, which goes apart from previous studies in that it was completely revenue neutral as we like it. In their study, they started it in 2016, which seemed like far in the future back then. They started it at $10 per metric ton of CO2, and only CO2. They don't do any other natural gases. It's just CO2. And they have it escalating at $10 per year through at least to the 2030s. They wanted to get up to that $100 mark that had been seen to be very important. And do remember when you're explaining this to anyone that this is at the point of extraction or at the point of entry. So it's when you pull it out of the ground or bring it into the country. When you talk to legislators, they're normally going to think that this is like a gas tax where people will have to figure out their usage or they're going to pay at the pump or something like that. This obviously is much sooner than that, and they wind up paying, whatever the heck they use, stuff that needed carbon heavy, whatever it was, and that's the beauty of it. As I said, it's fee and dividend, so 100% renewal or revenue neutral, and in this case, they handled the refund as a kind of an allotment. So for a family of 4, of 2 adults and 2 kids, that'd be like 3. So it's 1 share per adult, and then a half share for each kid. So I get 2.5 now. Yay! All right. And then, as I said, the border adjustments, they went through that as well. I'm trying to dig out exactly how, but helped a bunch. All right, their findings in brief. These are on the website as well. Yada yada, they demonstrate all kinds of nice things. The short of it was within the 20-year time scale, they had about 2.8 million more jobs under carbon fee and dividend than the baseline date. Yay, jobs! We made jobs. Woohoo! Woohoo! All right, and then, of course, the thing we actually did it for, the 52% reduction in carbon dioxide emissions from baseline. Yay! Fewer emissions. All right, and then saved lives. What the heck? Over 200,000 premature deaths averted by improved air quality. What's that all about? Yeah, so that works. And those are the principal results. They like to note in there, and a good thing to note when talking with whomever you might be talking about this to, is that it isn't all bright and shiny. There were some kind of darker spots. They're relatively small, but it's good to bring that up so that you gain that rapport. So I'll cover some of that. All right, they almost bury it towards the back. Here are the numbers on the drop in CO2 emissions. As they say in the talk, is a certain consequence of the fiscal reform is this nice drop in CO2 emissions. And so it starts off kind of slow and then picks up pretty well as you continue on as the
Where do you get the baseline at?
the baseline, that's
1990.
yeah, 1990 baseline put forward. It's a pretty safe one. Yeah, and the baseline is just if we don't enact any legislation at all. All right. Here's our regional and national employment by percent. The national employment are the green bars in the background. They are up, as said. You go up. It's not a huge increase. It looks all nice because it's up, but the scale's It's less than 2%, though, you know, give or take. But yeah, okay, net increase, that's nice. And then by region, most of them go up. Hooray! Somebody doesn't. Take a guess. Yes, I heard Texas. Any other guesses on the states that went down?
Coal states.
Coal states, yeah. Yeah, a
Well, I
lot
think
of,
that line is just Texas, Oklahoma,
yes,
and one other state.
Louisiana.
Okay.
Yeah. Arkansas as well, yes. So, yeah. WSC, yeah, West, South, Central. Yeah. Yeah, so they went kind of down. Keep in mind that okay, so they went kind of down. That's not a lot.
But this is only the impact of, this ignores all other economic activity.
Right, it ignores the rest, I suppose. Yeah, this is just based on what we're doing here. So that went down a little bit. Not a lot, just a little bit. Yeah, so here's all of those colors. So there, you see the light blue, the West, South, Central? These guys, right there. Let's see, where are we in California? The pink. Oops, wrong way. Where's the pink? Hey. Yay, go show that to your members of Congress. Yeah, we had some nice meetings with our members of Congress where I just brought my little tablet and pulled it out. There's a 4-page PDF version of this available on the website as well that has these key slides. You can just pop it right up. And these are the slides directly out of the study itself. Okay, so some of the, we saw in some of those unfortunate states that there were some drops in employment. Okay, so this shows millions of dollars by industry. An interesting one. Okay, what goes up? Healthcare. What comes down? Manufacturing? And mining. I'll tell you why with manufacturing. They said it's kind of a weird thing with how they're coded. Basically, it's just that petroleum manufacturing falls into that section. Yeah, just, the crude oil is manufactured to be ready for your car, so it fits into that. Yeah, but a big one that pops up a lot is healthcare and social assistance. Any guesses on that one?
Aging population.
Right, aging population. So if we avert lots of premature deaths, that means we live longer, get chronically ill, require assistance and health care.
Well, that's going to be going up some. It's going to go up more, but it'll
Right.
go up some anyway because
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah, this is above baseline. So yeah, that go up anyways, and it's a good time to be in a company benefiting from healthcare.
It'd be really useful if they could separate the oil out of manufacturing, especially given the current political climate. Is that
Yeah,
totally
so that's this
impossible?
one.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is by manufacturing industries. So there's motor vehicles. You still get a bit of an increase. Hey, we might want to make new motor vehicles that are more fuel efficient. But then if you get down to petroleum and coal, obviously that's the hardest hit. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Well, given this administration, I heard they were all going to put us on an iceberg as old people and float us out the ocean.
I wouldn't be surprised given what I get every day.
I'm just curious about where the clean energy piece of the puzzle fits in this.
Right, so
There's
you
supposed
get
to be all these new jobs that more than fossil fuels now. So.
right, yeah. You get some of that here. A lot would fall into R&D. Yeah, wind and solar. There are other slides that I didn't throw into this one because I didn't think I'd have the time that show the shift in energy sectors and wind and solar. Wind especially blows up. Nuclear actually increases a little bit, and then yeah. So more than expected, I suppose. Yeah, which we won't touch on. Yeah, but yeah. And the one I'm always trying to sell, particularly in I'm down in San Diego, is that this would be such a big boom for the clean energy sector. We've got a lot of biofuels down in San Diego, so it'd be huge for that. I don't feel like it just stands out here. Yeah, but All right, but yeah, they don't. Oh, yeah, they don't cover that one as much. All right, so and then we'll get into the actual dividend. What's going to happen with the dividend? That's been coming up a lot more recently. With, as Mark said, that's the thing talked about most. Particularly, even in the past years when we've gone around and talked to Democrats in Congress, like, okay, great, this sounds neat. When you pass it, great. I get that you don't want me to push it. You want a Republican. I'll co-sponsor. Fantastic. what are we going to do with the dividend? And people have all kinds of crazy ideas. So remember, we like our revenue neutral dividend. This covers the cost of living increase that would come up from some of this, because remember our economy is still fairly heavily tied to some of these fossil fuel oriented things. So it does increase a little bit. It ranges by region. Notice, hooray, we're pink again, kind of on the bottom. It's pretty expensive in California anyways. But there's a range from about 1.2 to 2.4 over the full time scale of this thing. But how does that get offset? A lot of money gets brought in.
Just in 3 more minutes.
Okay, 3 months. That's about right. So carbon tax revenues, a lot of money comes in. We get some from border adjustment revenues, much less. But the carbon tax revenues come in pretty high. And you'll see almost 600,000, that's millions of dollars. And remember, if we're returning all of that, then that all goes back to families. So as you saw that rate of increase, there's actually one graph where they put them on top of each other and this trend relatively nicely. Over the years, the increase of the dividend is obviously very helpful. They said it started with something like $288 after the first 10 years, and then it ratchets up to almost $400 by the end of 20 years.
And that's monthly, right?
That's monthly.
Not annual.
Yeah. And yeah, it was interesting to hear this morning about how complicated that would get with families and some households. Good luck.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
Is that assuming that the production of fossil fuels stays constant? Because it seems like as it would get that expensive, it would be prohibitive. So I wonder if the tax credit would, there'd be enough revenue to give every person that much money.
Right. Yeah, that's why you see it level off. Well, it's hard to level off some. That's mostly, from a lack of demand, though they assume at some point there's going to be a shift and you'll have more supply than demand. But yeah, I don't know how much I don't think they really covered how much the market would shift in terms of how many fossil fuel industries. Well, they did to an extent. Oh, sorry. Yes?
So biofuels, is that carbon or
biofuels, in terms of, depends on which one. Yes,
I mean, would you
in general.
tax
Yeah.
biofuels?
No, and they didn't really cover that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
We've got a minute.
Okay, 1 minute. And then the last one, it is my last slide. Interesting one about families moving, and it shows the different regions of the country and how many people might move from there over a baseline. And they had a lot of people moving to Chicago, oddly enough.
What?
Hey, what? Yeah.
Yeah,
But to throw it in perspective, you might get asked this by your legislator. With this tax, let's say 1 gallon of gasoline weighs about 6.3 pounds, burns about that much CO2. That's how many out of the metric tons it is. That means for every $1 of gas, it's going to be going up about a cent at the beginning, if it's $10. Yeah, 1 cent at first per $1. So gas right now, $2, so 2 cents. Yep.
Just getting back on the manufacturing, I guess what could pretty quick.
Sure.
The impact on our employment, I guess, national employment for this. It doesn't. It's a positive, that positive, negative on employment.
Right. It's a net positive, and that there is less than a 2% increase in jobs, period, across the country. So that's good. And a lot of it's a shift from a very job poor sector, which oil and gas particularly are very job poor sectors. You don't need that many guys to work it. A much smaller percentage of our country works in those areas than healthcare. And the increase in healthcare is actually a very job-rich sector. So you get more people.
Okay, Tristan.
I'm down.
Thank you. Does he know something about economics or
Yeah, a little
what?
bit.
Okay. Now we go to someone in the age category of a lot of us here. John ODell has a distinguished career in academia. He was on the faculty at Harvard and is retired and Professor Emeritus. He was director of the School of International Relations at the University of Southern California. John is active in CCL, but he also runs a small project that publishes short papers to help improve the global governance of climate. And that's for a think tank called the Center for International Governance Innovation. And that outfit, that center, sent him to COP20 in Lima and then COP21 in Paris. John spoke about the Paris Agreement at last year's regional conference, and this past October, this very center published John's policy brief entitled, How the United States Can Do Much More on Climate and Jobs, which outlines a political strategy for enacting carbon fee and dividend. John ODell.
Thank you. Jeff. I think I'm going to stand on the other side of the power cord here, for fear I might trip over it. Thank you for a great job on the Remy report. I would just add one other thing. That slide he showed with the distribution of effects by industry, jobs by industry, I think the really good news is there that most people are not thinking about. If you do it this way with a dividend, the big increase in jobs is not really in solar and wind production. That's what everybody thinks about. It's really in all those other industries, healthcare, construction, retail, and so on, which respond to consumer spending, which increases because of the dividend. So the big picture. And actually the share of Americans or jobs that work in fossil fuel production is a very small minority. So there will be a decline there. But even there, in the worst case, there's another table in the report, it's about 23% over 20 years in the oil industry. So at the end of 20 years, there's still going to be 77% as many people working in the oil industry, and that's the biggest decline. Okay, some years ago, several congressmen asked, well, but you're going to be raising prices, and what's this going to do to the poor people? And we knew that the beauty of this plan is with the dividend, unlike most carbon tax proposals, you have the dividend to offset the cost. But we didn't have a precise answer about how much it would be raising people's costs and how that would compare with the dividends they were getting. So CCL commissioned another study, raised some more money, and hired Kevin to write this household impact study. So this half of the session is for those who would like to use the results of this study in their communications, and for people who don't happen to be economists. I'm not one of them either. I'd like to start with my conclusion and then back up and show you how I got there. When I've given talks on our proposal, this is what I've been saying. And this one slide is the whole main point of this afternoon. If you forget everything else, it's okay. And in fact, reducing the whole impact study to one sentence, I would say the main point is this dividend plan protects low-income families from the costs of this transition. It's excellent news for people concerned about the distributional impact of our plan. To unpack that just a little bit, the dividends are equal. They're not graduated more to the poor people. They're equal. But it turns out that low-income people have smaller carbon footprints than high-income people. They tend to live in apartments, they take the bus, they don't ride on planes very much, whereas the high-end people have multiple houses, big houses, multiple vehicles in the same family, ride on planes a lot. So the carbon footprint tends to go up with income. Among poor families, 90% will actually get more in dividends than they will pay in higher costs due to the carbon fee. Yes, it's going to raise their costs, but by less than the dividend. So they come out ahead. If you take all households nationally, 54% of households will come out ahead financially in the first year. This is all referring to the first year of our plan. And finally, among the upper 2/5, the more affluent households, most will see costs a bit greater than their dividends, or go up a little bit more, but it's only a little bit. That is, the average loss for these affluent households is only 0.2% of their income. That's the conclusion for this session. I'm going to come back to it at the end. I have not been saying in my talks, but I would like to add, if I have time in the talk, the following addition to the conclusion. This report understates the gains from our proposal. The author calls his report a worst-case scenario, and that's because he looks only at the effects on a $15 a ton fee. And that's essentially the first year of our plan. Our plan is the second year it goes to $25 a ton, third year $35 a ton, and on up every year, $10 per ton. And so he doesn't reflect the economic gains that take place once the fee starts rising. In particular, we all have the chance to reduce our carbon footprints. That's the whole idea of imposing this and announcing it in advance that it's going to be going up $10 a year. And so affluent people too can reduce their carbon footprints. Everybody can reduce their footprint and save more money than is shown in his report. So that's one way it understates the gains. Second, we know that as Kristen just showed, the economy expands over time as industry shifts, production technology, and jobs are created. And some of those low-income people may have a better chance of getting a job because of the new jobs. And he understates it in a third way, and this is true of all of the efforts to estimate the effects of carbon taxes, because they don't include the benefits of avoiding all that climate change that we're otherwise going to be hit with. And this is going to be a serious economic problem, in addition to an environmental and a health problem. We know this is an environmental organization we're part of, but I often want to remind people that climate change is an enormous challenge to the world economy. The head of the IMF, which is not a notoriously left-leaning greenie organization, has said climate change is the single biggest economic threat to the world economy in the 21st century. And we'll avoid a lot of that if we go ahead and get started on this. But they don't have good estimates. They're not willing to trust their estimates on how much it's going to cost if we don't act. So they leave it out of their models. So it understates in that sense too. He doesn't talk about the health gains or the health losses that Tristan just showed you would be affecting us if we don't act. And the U.S. Pentagon reminds us that climate change is multiplying the threats to international stability, the refugee pressure, and so forth. And so that's left out as well. So I don't summarize the results of the household impact study by using general words like they show which congressional districts do well and which do badly, because he doesn't count a lot of ways that people will do better. I summarize it as who gains and who loses financially in the first year. That's a simple way to put it. Okay, that was the conclusion. Now let me back up and work back up to it. This is the cover page of the household impact study. He was asked, CCL asked him to give us results that we can reduce to the congressional district. We want specific results for every congressional district so we can use it in our lobbying. So he was asked to produce what he called a high resolution analysis. And the way he did that was to narrow the question so he could go deep. He looks only at the financial effect on a household. How much dollars will it get with the dividend? How many dollars will it pay in addition due to the carbon fee? And he limited it to 1 year, the $15 fee. I put
$15. We heard 10 here earlier.
Sorry?
I think Tristan said it was $10
Oh,
first.
the other study was... The REMI study assumed a $10 fee starting point, and that's different from our proposal. And so it's not quite exact, but that's what they did. I put in red two aspects on this just because I think when we're talking to sophisticated people like congressional staff or editorial boards, it's a good idea to, well, first place, they're going to be suspicious of us when we come in the door because they talk to lots of advocacy groups every day, and they learn from experience that these groups tend to spin them, leave out inconvenient facts, etc.
So they may begin by assuming we're like them. And if the group pays for the study itself, it's less reliable than if it's done by an independent group. And if it's published or peer-reviewed, it's more reliable than otherwise. So in this case, we have to say, and I recommend that we do say, we paid for this study. It is, at this point, it's a working paper. The author expects to submit it for peer review in publication in independent journals, but it hasn't been published yet. That's the straightforward, transparent way to put it. He still hasn't submitted it as of November, according to Danny Richter, but I think we can earn credibility by just being transparent about this and making it clear. My PhD is not in economics either, and if yours is, you should be up here doing this. Maybe you can help me. Now, if anybody were to ask you for the methods involved in this study, we don't have to be prepared to answer that. Just promise to send them the study. That'll quiet them. But it might help us individually to have some basic understanding of what he did to get to these conclusions that I'm going to come back to in just a minute. So he asked that limited question. And then if you think of your own household, for example, the question would be, how much of a dividend are you going to get? And how much is your cost going to go up due to this carbon fee? And the result is what he calls your net financial benefit. Are you better off financially or worse off financially when the fee is $15? And figuring out your dividend is pretty straightforward. We know it's going to be equal for everybody. It'll just be the total amount of carbon fee revenue divided by the population. But how much are your costs going to go up due to the carbon fee? Well, we know that it's going to be assessed by the oil companies at the wellhead, and they're probably going to pass the cost down to the refiners and the supermarkets and the airlines and the manufacturers and so on. But how much does that mean for me? How will be able to estimate the cost for my particular spending? Well, the next basic fact that we know, that he knows, is that different goods and services have different amounts of carbon embedded in them. And the interesting thing is, as you probably know, is that most of our emissions, personal emissions, are not from gasoline and natural gas that we burn directly into the atmosphere. They are embedded in the stuff we buy. More than half of our personal emissions are embedded. And we know that stuff that has more carbon in it is going to go up more in price than stuff that has less carbon in it if the fee is assessed in terms of CO2. Anybody calculated your own carbon footprint? Okay, so you know this. You go through what you buy, and you can see how your own carbon footprint will be determined. So given that knowledge, that the amount of carbon in a good determines how much the price will go up, Mr. Hummel went and took existing data from U.S. agencies. There's a survey of households asking how much did you spend on what during the last year. There's another survey of businesses asking how much did you sell, the other side of the same transactions. Those two don't quite match up, so he had to figure out a way to account for that. He has estimates of the carbon intensity of spending on 52 different categories of goods and services. And he worked in a correction for price differences by zip code, since, if you buy the same thing in New York City and in Little Rock, Arkansas, you pay more in New York City, and this is supposed to be accurate at the zip code level. And then he took all these data and generated simulations to produce the results at household levels. This is kind of the central core table in the report that gives you the basic results. If you can imagine taking all the households in the country and lining them up in a line with the poorest all the way out to the most affluent, and then dividing those into 5 equal groups, equal numbers of households in each group. That's 5 quintiles. So on the left side here, this is the quintile 1. This is the lowest income set of people. And over here is the most affluent. And then he uses his model to generate the answer. Do they come out better financially or worse off financially when the fee is $15? And the table shows, the chart shows that 87% of the households in the poorest quintile come out ahead. They are a net financial beneficiary. They have more money at the end of the year than it costs them to pay their prices. Down here at the bottom are the numbers. The average gain for these families is about $300 a year. That's the amount that their dividends are above their added costs. If you look at the second quintile, it's also positive. Third quintile, it's still positive, just about absolutely break even. So the bottom three quintiles, on average, all come out even or even better than even as a result of our plan. The top two, even in the top quintile, 15% of the households are actually going to gain more in dividends than they pay in higher prices. But most of them, 85%, will end up paying more in higher prices than they get in their dividend.
John, one more minute.
Oh dear, okay. But notice, further good news, even for them, the loss is 0.2%. They aren't really going to notice it. And the overall result is highly progressive, in the author's words. I'll skip that. If you want to get this working paper and the results for your congressional district, you can just search with the search engine Citizen Climate Lobby Household Impact, or just Climate Household Impact. We'll get it.
On our website?
It's at the bottom.
It is on the CCL website, and you can navigate down step by step to find it, but this is actually faster if you just use the search engine, use Google.
I think it's right at the bottom of the page of the main website.
I
Remy
think
and
this would be the fastest way.
Okay.
I tried it. Yeah.
We'll show it.
We do have more time for discussion.
Yeah, questions?
Just question, is the dividend taxable?
Yes. Well, that's one of Hummel's assumptions. He assumes that the Congress will make it taxable. And maybe I should take a second to answer this question. He also assumes that only 80% of the revenue from the carbon fee will be available for dividends because 20% of it will be needed to pay the export rebates. I think that's probably realistic. He leaves out the cost of administering the dividends, which is not realistic. It will cost a fair amount in the first couple of years, but after the first couple of years, the percentage going, as the fee gets larger and the pool gets much larger, it won't make that much difference. He does assume that the Congress will make the dividend taxable because the government is going to experience increased costs. The Pentagon buys a huge amounts of diesel fuel and gasoline, and so do all the other agencies. So government spending is going to go up just like household spending goes up because of the fee. And even so, he finds that the increased income from taxing dividends will not quite cover the increase in cost for the government. So there'll be a deficit, he assumes, of about $1 billion increase in the federal deficit due to CFD.
Per year.
In the first year. This is all about $15 a ton. But just for reference, notice the size of the deficit last year was $587 billion. And if you figure the cost of climate change, unlimited climate change on the federal budget, it could be way worse than $1 billion a year. So this was the conclusion I started with. And in a minute, I'm going to ask you to look this over and then practice on your neighbor and see if you could convey the meaning of this study in your own words. But first, are there any other questions and comments if you disagree? Way in the back.
What was the assumption on military costs, Tristan?
No specific assumption. He just projected the effects on households.
Military jobs?
No, not in this study.
On the first day?
First study, I believe that was
Oh,
public
the
sector
REMI.
only.
Just to, as a point of reference, I've heard the Pentagon say that as the biggest user of petroleum in the world, the U.S. military, we could save the United States $1 billion a day by getting off fossil fuels. And they have said they're ready. It's Congress that's holding up that. So.
Congress that's holding it up.
Yeah, and that's not included.
Front row and then second row.
I wanted to point out that chart that you showed with the distribution by quintile, those are people who come out ahead or are only marginally negative. So it's some people are breaking even in that 81% poor people. and others are ahead, and a few are a little negative.
You mean within each quintile?
Yeah.
That's right. That's an average within each quintile. So there's going to be variation from every household to the next one, depending on their carbon footprints. That's right. Please.
You mentioned that the first year there are additional climatological benefits, I think. But would there actually be any benefits? Because if, say, 15 cents a gallon increase in gas price, people are not going to make much change the first year, right? You wouldn't expect any change from that. That goes up monthly by 15 cents per gallon. So nobody's going to notice it if everything in the U.S. right, goes up by the same level for gas. They're not going to change their habits that quick.
Yeah, didn't mean to say there would be any change in the first year based on this study, because he assumes the first year is kind of a snapshot. There's no time between day 1 and day 365 in his study. He just assumes 1 year, $15 a ton, and there's no movement in the economy. He freezes the whole economy and gives you the result at $15. That's why it's a limited worst-case scenario.
And similarly in the other study, there's a heavy lag between when it actually gets implemented and when you see a lot of the changes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
I think it's also important to point out that it's not our consumption directly of fuel, it's business planning that will drive this switch.
That's good, yeah.
Right, if half the CO2 is being used for manufacturing of goods and other industrial use, once those industries start recognizing that their costs are going to go up if they keep burning the same amount of fossil fuel, they're going to start investing in either higher efficiency methods or other types of non-fossil fuel.
That's right, and the REMI study reflects that process over 20 years. The household impact study does not.
Yeah, that's why some larger company CEOs have also said that they prefer this drastically over cap and trade, because you can plan around this,
Right.
what's going to happen.
And it's that planning which leads up in.
John, I was interested in your point about the study being published, or not being published and not being peer-reviewed yet. Curious, Tristan, about the Remy study, what the status is with that on the same subject.
To my knowledge, not peer reviewed yet. Kind of
Any
the same.
plans for it?
I had been told so. Yeah, but yeah.
For me, the Remy study is a gold standard, because that organization has been hired to do similar modeling to the American gas producers, to the National Education Association, Teachers Union on the left. There's a whole range of companies. They're regarded as kind of the go-to private firm for modeling that involves energy and economics. Peter?
Yeah, John, that might be true, but I don't think most members of the public know what REMI is. And so I agree with Edric that it's important to get it. If you guys have a direct, you guys are talking about the CCL bigwigs, I definitely advocate for getting the REMI study peer reviewed and published as well. Even though,
Please.
so do we.
One cost that they don't consider is the social costs of doing nothing. And Andrew Guzman has written a wonderful book on the cost of climate change. And he talks about the increased conflict that we will have to deal with perhaps 3.5 billion climate refugees just in Southeast Asia. As glaciers disappear and water sources dry up. Now there are political and economic think tanks that know how to figure that sort of cost in.
That's right, and that op-ed we got this morning is an example of some of those studies. And the Obama EPA did factor the social cost of carbon into the benefits and costs of the Clean Power Plan. That's probably about to go away. Peter?
I think we should thank John for a wonderful talk. We were actually out of time here.
Yeah.
The next session.
Thank you very much.